Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this discussion today. We have a phenomenal panel discussion lined up, and we hope that all of you will enjoy it. And this is the Economic Times IBM India Reshape Tomorrow Manufacturing Industry CEO Roundtable. Thank you all for joining us, all on the panel, and the people who are joining in to listen to us. Thank you all very much for sparing time. You know, we have plans to conduct 7 such roundtables with CEOs of different industries, and today is the first of this series. And today we will chat on beyond COVID opportunities for the manufacturing sector. My name is Alokesh Bhattacharya. I am senior editor of the Economic Times. I am joined by my colleague Suchetana.
Hello everyone, I'm Suchetana Ray, Senior Assistant Editor with the Economic Times, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to today's discussion. As we all know, that manufacturing is at the core and is at the core of the strength of any economy. So a dialogue amongst CEOs of different segments of the manufacturing sector will definitely throw up a lot of takeaways for all of us. And we have a very powerful panel here today. So let's have a quick round of introductions. We have with us Mr. R.S. Sodhi, MD, Amul, Rajiv Chhabra, President and MD, MG Motor India, Anil Chaudhary, CEO, Schneider Electric India, A.S. Mehta, President and Director, JK Paper.
We also have with us S. Sridhar, Managing Director of Pfizer India, Vinod Agarwal, MD and CEO of Volvo Eicher Commercial Vehicles, Manish Sharma, President and CEO of Panasonic India and South Asia, and from IBM we have Sandeep Patel, Managing Director, IBM India and South Asia.
Before we dive into today's discussion, I'll just take a few minutes where we set the context for today's discussion. The COVID-19 outbreak has exposed the vulnerabilities, as we've seen, of the manufacturing sector because of its dependence on the complex global supply chains. The current situation, we saw how it forced markets around the globe to either alter or reset these supply chains. The situation is, as many say, an opportunity for India to position itself as a manufacturing destination in the medium term. But the question that we'll ask today is that, but does India have the right business and policy environment along with the capability to become a global manufacturing hub? How does the government's Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign sit amidst all of this? I mean, these are some of the questions that we are certain will be answered by the time this panel discussion comes to an end. You know, macroeconomic fundamentals, growth and demand potential, continued availability of skilled labor, FDI, tax regime, government spend on creation of supporting manufacture, industry-specific policies, subsidies, and incentive schemes are some of the aspects that will perhaps finally decide whether India actually becomes the next manufacturing destination.
Yeah, but you know, given the impact of the pandemic, macroeconomic numbers, as we all know, they are not looking good. The projection for the GDP growth of this fiscal is quite dismal. You know, factory output as measured by the IIP just shrank for the 6th month in a row. As the impact of the nationwide lockdown began to wane, August output marked the lowest contraction since factory production began falling in March. Basic metals, tobacco, transport equipment, they were the manufacturing sectors that saw some growth. Mining and manufacturing output, they have been the biggest drag on the IIP. Although the Chief Statistician's Department has warned against measuring current data with pre-COVID numbers, the question on everybody's mind is, how long will the manufacturing sector really take to revive? And what are the factors that will be critical in driving growth and in reshaping tomorrow?
Before we dive into that discussion, I would like to invite Sandeep Patel of IBM to give his opening remarks. Over to you, Sandeep.
Thank you. And it's great to be here at this forum with such great leaders. Let me just start off by providing some context. Manufacturing sector clearly is a key pillar of the Indian economy with immense future potential. The government's focus on initiatives such as Make in India and Digital India with Atmanirbhar Bharat is a great start for the growth of the sector. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has also helped in amplifying India's potential as an attractive manufacturing destination for global companies, particularly those that are exploring newer production hubs. The country received about 20 billion in investments during the lockdown period that led to about a 20% growth in FDI compared to last year. Manufacturing companies are aggressively looking to understand their customers better, driven by advanced data analytics, to enable customization at scale. Now, this is expected to create new products and services via digital engagement channels to build new sources of revenue and profit, a need that cannot be met by traditional strategies that rely only on sales-driven mass production lines. There is an urgent need, I believe, to change before they get disrupted. Manufacturers that move successfully to the new model will have a mix of connected services and products that optimizes customer performance. The result will be increased revenue and profits for manufacturing companies. Parallelly, as the world becomes more connected, enterprises are also bringing down barriers to extend collaboration both inside and outside their organization and pivot to new connected ecosystems with the client at the center. In this context, we believe that platforms will continue to emerge both within industries and those that enable the development of digital ecosystem across industries to unlock new sources of value. Let me give you a few examples, and this is across different industries. For example, iQuipo, which is a digital marketplace for infrastructure equipment, it has become India's first digital platform to digitize the co-lending programs of banks and NBFCs. The portal, which was jointly developed with IBM, it offers transformational technology with the highest level of security, performance, and transparency. Now, the platform not only offers its customers an option to choose from different financial institutions, it also negotiates with them online on behalf of the financial institution and customizes offers according to the financing needs. Manufacturers are exploring to create the next wave of such business models, find new avenues of partnership to capitalize on the opportunities that are presented by the emergence of these new ecosystems. Let me give you a global example, just to again illustrate the notion of platforms. In June this year, Shell and IBM launched Oren, which is a co-developed global B2B digital mining services marketplace platform, which is aimed at helping mining companies find solutions related to safety, sustainability, mine planning, and operational efficiency. By hosting new technology and digital solutions in one place, Oren aims to accelerate the digitization of the mining industry, speed up the transformation of mining workflows, and build in more operational resiliency in a rapidly changing world. Now, many such business platforms are emerging as organizations seek additional growth opportunities outside traditional sources, capitalizing on particular functions or activities that constitute their true competitive advantage. Adoption of digital technologies in the manufacturing industry is rapidly increasing with investments around cloud computing, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, AR, deep learning, robotics, 3D printing, etc., which is all of these which have the cumulative effect of accelerating Industry 4.0. The growth momentum in the sector in India will further propel the adoption of modern technology and advancement towards Industry 4.0. Similar to the global phenomenon that we are seeing of Industry 4.0, the transformation will also see new evolving business models and will create opportunities for future collaboration with tech partners and also startups for accelerating automation and setting the growth agenda. Digital technology adoption is not just restricted to large manufacturing companies, but actually it's even more relevant and is being witnessed in the MSME segment, which is small, micro, small, medium business units as well. I'm thrilled today to be a part of this conversation, and I'm looking forward to delve further on some of these areas to talk about manufacturing's rapid transformation and how India is poised to become a hub for manufacturing and enabling futuristic digital change in the manufacturing industry. Back over to you.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you very much. Indeed, in fact, manufacturing is probably most impacted by digital technologies, and I don't mean it negatively, right? There is so much of leverage that digital technology can provide to manufacturers. All the technologies you mentioned, 3D printing and IoT, these are each one in itself is a transformational technology that can completely, change the way manufacturers move. And of course, the way to do it is to try and find new sources of revenue. That is the most important part. So thanks for that perspective. I will now, just let you know that we have recently done a CXO survey with Kantar IMRB on the challenges being posed by COVID and how are companies reacting to it, how have they managed their systems. So give me a minute while I share my screen. I will just take you through some of the insights that we have there for the manufacturing industry. Right. Can you see this? Just checking.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the CXO survey of 2020 done by ET and Kantar as part of this project, on challenges posed by COVID-19 and the solutions for companies. There were 310 respondents across 230 companies. The industries that were covered include manufacturing, BFSI, education, healthcare, retail, media, entertainment, consumer products, and telecom. Within the manufacturing industry, 81 companies participated, and this is the respondent breakup. I won't go into great detail, but as you can see, industrial products and automotive are more than 50% of the base of the universe for manufacturing that was in the survey. And almost 70% comprise very senior people, from the senior management, managing directors to board level people. And in terms of function, this widely distributed between production, finance, marketing, technology, sales, HR, and supply chain. So it's quite a representative sample, and it will give you a good idea of what top management of India in manufacturing are thinking about handling the pandemic. This is, I think, more obvious now than when we had actually launched the survey. But the interesting thing is that most people, almost 60% people, felt that manufacturing was doing very, very well before the pandemic. Of course, as a journalist, I have issues with that, but we leave that aside for now. The leadership feels that manufacturing was doing very well before the pandemic, and now the number has totally reversed. More than 70% feel that it has impacted, the COVID-19 has impacted manufacturing very badly. What are the concerns of organizations? Among the top concerns, if you see, employee health status is the most important for the senior people in companies. Cybersecurity comes next. Supply chain resilience follows. And then there are the others, such as empowering the remote workforce, enhancing IT resilience, engaging with the customer virtually, and data access from home. So the top concern is employee health status and cybersecurity. But the interesting part, what action did the companies take? In this, you will find that addressing cybersecurity risks is really not at the top where it should be, because that is where the concern was the highest, right? But the action seems to be low on that front, and more action was towards IT resilience and empowering the remote workforce. This is a very detailed slide. If you want, you can take a screenshot and study it and go through it in depth later. I will not go through it in great depth. But what we noticed here, if you quickly glance through it, you'll realize that the actions that were operationally easy, relatively easier to execute, they were the ones that got more prominence, during the lockdown months and subsequently, whereas the strategic points were probably left for dealing with later. As far as technology integration in key business areas is concerned, which are the areas where the top management of Indian manufacturing feels technology can work best? Remote workforce comes right out on top. Security and privacy follows. Scalable infrastructure gets a lot of importance, and followed by supply chain resilience, process automation, and finally cash flow management at the bottom. This is not good. As you can see, like we were saying in the beginning, even the top management of companies feel, almost 60% of the respondents in our survey feel that Q3 of this fiscal is going to be much worse than Q3 of 2019. That was the survey. There are more industries covered, and as we go into the other industries, we will bring out all the facets. And of course, we'll come out with a report in ET also. Only on the survey, where you can, we'll send you the copies and you can take a look at the findings there. Suchitna, you're on mute.
Thank you. That seems to be the most said sentence these days, as some panelists told us some months back, that you're on mute. Thank you, Alokesh, for taking us through that survey, rich takeaways from there. Let's dive into the discussion, and we will divide today's discussion into three distinct parts. Opportunities from COVID, path to 25% share for manufacturing in India's GDP, and the role of technology in this growth. So first, of course, we'll tackle the headline topic. Our survey says that companies took swift action on areas that actually required less effort. That is perhaps understandable, but what part of long-term strategy has COVID changed? What are the new opportunities that you have identified that would build competitive differentiation and drive future growth? So we will handle that first. And let's start with Dr. Sodhi of Amul. Sir, you're one of the few companies that successfully converted this disruption, the months of lockdown that we saw, into an opportunity. Your company actually has shown a 17% year-on-year growth in turnover. So my question to you is, how have the first quarter and the second quarter been, and what are the new opportunities that you have spotted in terms of products and or markets? Dr. Sodhi.
Yeah, Suchitra ji, thank you very much. Betting आपने opening में मुझे डाल दिया.
Sir, you are very well capable of handling the fast bowlers.
Yeah. So what actually we are very lucky that Amul or dairy is a very important part of the food, and food, which is a $500 billion Indian sector. And we are impacting manufacturing in two aspects, because all the other sectors are sitting here. You see, one side, manufacturing sector, we are in our whole supply chain, which is C2C, cow to consumer, or B2C, buffalo to consumer, various manufacturing sectors involved. The other sector, we are the catalyst in boosting manufacturing sector, because food is $5 billion, dairy is more than $100 billion. So we are providing $100 billion revenue to the consumer, mainly rural milk producers, who are demanding manufacturing goods. This is one thing. Now coming to the opportunity like this, out of $500 billion, organized food is only $80 billion, where manufacturing sector is involved. And if I talk in particular about dairy is today India's $110 billion today, and after 10 years it will be $200 billion. Organized is only $30 billion, and this $30 billion in another 10 years. Organized is not $30 billion out of 110. It is only $11 billion. In 10 years, it will be $30 billion. And dairy total will be $200 billion. So why I'm giving this data, let me tell you, opportunities for the manufacturing sector. Because as we invest more in milk, organized sector, more investments are required. From this today's capacity of around 120 million, if we want to grow to the 300 million liters per day capacity, will be requiring around 1 lakh crore investment, and 1.2 crore jobs will be created. And when I say opportunities, it is not only in the plants, right from milking machines. We require milking millions of milking machines. Like we have got refrigerator or two-wheelers or four-wheelers at all. Each farmer wants a milking machine, which is more or less imported. So local, right? Second, during COVID, what we have found is consumers are now shifting more towards packed, branded, and branded also trustworthy brand, and more affordable brand. So manufacturing, what we are looking for is more transparency. When I say transparency, it does not mean only digital transformation in the factories, right from milk procurement, milk transportation, milk processing, milk distribution, milk returning. Everywhere we require a lot of technology and manufacturing inputs, which are bringing efficiency, transparency, but affordability is very essential. In India, any manufacturing sector any solution want to go, it has to be affordable at the lower end of the Indian, lower middle class. And that you get such a scale that your whole business becomes very, very viable. And then you can become supply to the world. But let us consider today manufacturing more to the India, because there in food or dairy, opportunities are immense.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Sodhi. In fact, there is no doubt that opportunities are immense for Indian manufacturing. That is a thread that we will pick up a little later in the conversation as well. I want to now take the original question that Suchetna asked to Rajiv from MG Motor. Rajiv, MG Motor, of course, like we were discussing just before we went live, MG Motor has done exceptionally well, some really good products, very good marketing and advertising strategy, could connect with the consumer. How, what next? What is it? I know that you are coming up with an electric vehicle, but in terms of, product strategy, in terms of brand strategy, what are the new opportunities that you spotted for future growth?
Thanks a lot, Alokesh. Looks like the way Mr. Sodhi has talked about, I should move to the food sector. But, but I think right now I'm happy and contented with my car sector. I think, to put this question in perspective, I would say, when we decided to be in India 4 years back or so, the thing was very clear that when you have to beat giants like Maruti and Hyundai, and you want to be in the consideration set of consumers, you need to do something different and innovative, and it has to be a little bit disruptive. So I think that was the whole philosophy of disruption in our mind when we thought about entering, what should be our entry strategy. And let's accept the fact, and I'll say it very humbly, that except, let's say, these two giants who control 70% market share, and by the way, Kia is a good entrant and they have done a pretty good job. Yeah. And Mahindra, they are good local heroes, and they have their strengths in their whole integration. But apart from that, in four-wheeler, with due respect, I would say, you don't have any outstanding brand in the top of the consumers in India. All these Western brands, and they have done okay, but are they greatly successful the way Maruti and Hyundai is? It's not. So again, this is my humble opinion, so I think we needed to do things in a very different way. And that's where technology and innovation became one of the important pillars, apart from other pillars. So we said diversity side, community service side, and other pillars we had, but let's talk about innovation technology, what you talked about. So, our first car was the connected car, Hector. The second product was EV, and third product, Gloster, is autonomous level 1. So, when you talk about automotive, they say the future you can describe as CASE, C-A-S-E. C is connected, A is autonomous, S is shared mobility, and E is electric. So I think we have covered 3 parts of it already. And we are trying to provide, at an affordable price. Now, again, we can argue about affordability here because these are costly cars. These are not easy cars. These are not, but they are sub 40 lakhs cars, right? So it's still within the reasonable definition of affordability. At least it's coming more and more mainstream. But the important point is, we are bringing technology in the country, and we are working with institutes like ITIs to IITs to diploma institutes to how do we localize this technology, impart the skills to the local guys, how do we get more localization out of these things, phase-wise manufacturing, we can do it. I think that's what is value addition within the country, in my opinion. And little bit raising the bar in our own way, because now certain things are becoming standard and we are pushing everyone to, follow that. Like connected car is going to become, I think, 100% in my opinion, in the next 3 or 4 years, every car line would be giving it. So I think that's the way we want to see it. But in terms of future, ownership models will change, I think. Subscription models are happening now. People want, instead of owning the car, you want to subscribe to the car. Right now, Uber and Ola have taken a little bit of beating because of hygiene issues, but I think they'll be back. They'll be back with vengeance, in my opinion, after, let's say, one and a half years, and people will still believe, because the whole reason of that model is economy. People want cheaper ways of owning or possessing a product. So I think all those things would happen. So my opinion, the next thing would be, we will have cheaper EVs in the market. In the two-wheeler side, truck side, buses side, three-wheeler side, already EV will happen faster than four-wheelers. But in four-wheelers, the tipping point will come, in my opinion, when the EV is below 10 lakhs of rupees. And my prediction, it would happen in the next 3 to 4 years for sure.
Right. I'll come to Mr. Anil Chaudhary of Schneider Electric, sir. As Mr. Chhabra was mentioning, that COVID has accelerated transformation in his sector. So I was looking at your quarterly results, and we see an impact of the pandemic on the revenue there. So, what is the way forward for you to drive future growth? What are the changes that COVID has brought about? We know that the concepts of future of living and future of work has changed. So how is that changing your strategy?
Yeah, thank you. And I think that the stage is set by Dr. Sodhi and Ray. The point which we have, seen in the COVID, that the world is going to be more and more electric. Now, if we sit back and look at that, when the whole world was in lockdown, there were two very important things which were making the world also still remaining active and connected. One was energy and the other was digital. And any country, any society which was probably a little bit advanced on this, they could, overall manage that whole situation in a much better comparatively compared to other parts of the world or other countries. I think this is where there's an opportunity, because as we have seen that whenever we talk about, India, I think one of the challenge has been our quality of the power, quality of the energy, and the way we have been probably using energy responsibly in terms of what form of energy we have to use and all. I think there is a huge opportunity now for that world is, or our country has to be more and more electric to be sustainable, to remain connected, and to take care of any of those kind of situations like the one which we faced in from middle of March till whole of April and all, when something lockdown happens, because to make the things go around, you will need those things. Now, when we look at our own aspect, because I think we are an industry which is providing critical, support to a lot of critical infrastructure, be it hospital, be it letting the cities run and supporting all the electric supply companies. We have seen that during this sudden lockdown, we were supposed to react quickly and ensure that we are able to deploy all those SOPs into our manufacturing site so that they can continue supporting all these critical power, the economic sectors, which were very much required to run at that point of time also. At the same time, looking at this, that how we were able to meet our export commitments. So the way forward for us is that how we accelerate the work which we have started on automation of our manufacturing site. Because what you need is an agile supply chain for us. That's very important, because your demands are local, we are part of the group where we almost export 50% what we produce here. How we can go and more accelerate Industry 4.0, and it includes all the segments. It's not only the manufacturing, because all the segments where we want to accelerate, where we want to be sustainable, we have to accelerate this Industry 4.0 deployment. And that's what we have started accelerating in our plant. We have lighthouses of factories, so where we have put the whole automation. And these are our factories which are now lighthouses within our group, and also for the manufacturing industry in the country. So we see that as we come out of this, the criticality of agility, criticality of productivity, criticality of the efficiency, criticality of the sustainability, and making the more and more robotics, automation be part of the infrastructure, we see a lot of opportunities there, and that's where we are now developing our strategy. We are actually accelerating our strategy on that direction, and we see that MSMEs, which never had ever come to us, that they want to make their unit more energy sustainable. They want to make the unit more efficient. So they are coming to us because they are going to now see that how their plants can be managed remotely, can be monitored remotely, can also handle these kind of challenges. And once that sector goes into this adaptation of technology, Industry 4.0, I think the whole manufacturing sector is going to take advantage. And our position within the world supply chain also improves, where all these are very important facts: the quality, sustainability, and the impact, what you supply to the world, how it is impacting the climate is going to be a very big decision-making factor for our future customers. So that's where we are now accelerating our journey on.
Right. Thank you, Anil. And in fact, I can see Mr. Agarwal itching to get in because there's so much of electric being discussed, right? And so I also cannot resist the opportunity to come to you. So, Mr. Agarwal, while commercial vehicles, in September the performance has been slightly better than the previous months. I think April, May were completely washed out, but gradually things have improved. Even VECV numbers have also improved in September. But those are very local kind of things. And so, how has COVID redefined the strategic reallocations that allocations you give for future of living and driving the fact that so much of electric is going to come in, like Rajiv is predicting, like Anil is saying. How does that impact your business? What are the opportunities that you have spotted in the commercial vehicles segment? Tell us about it.
I think if you look at the fundamentals first, of course, the electric and all these new technologies are going to come. That will take some time. But I think the basic fundamental thing is that in India, the logistics costs are still very high. They are almost 12 to 13% of the GDP as compared to 6 to 7% in the developed countries. So now these trucks are very, very important part of the logistics cost. Now this logistics, if you have to improve this logistics cost, it means a lot of things have to happen. I think if you start with the modernizing the trucks, I think that is one most important. Even if you look at the trucks today plying on the roads, some of the trucks, majority of the trucks, they are with the roadside built cabins. They are not safe cabins. Yeah. So the safety standards have to improve. Then of course with the infrastructure improving, the speeds will go up. It means the trucks have to be even much more safer. Technologies will keep on changing. BS6 has come in now. So it means a lot more opportunities to improve in technology. And then the overall cost of ownership for the customer. I think that is going to become more and more important. With the customer is becoming more conscious of the cost. Now, if you look at what is the cost of ownership for a truck owner? For a truck owner, 50% of the cost of ownership is the fuel efficiency. So therefore, a lot of focus is going to come on the fuel efficiency. How do you continuously improve the fuel efficiency by providing the better technology? And then the second most important thing is the productivity. How do you continuously improve the productivity so that the truck, he remains on the road most of the time. Uptime is maximum. Now, when you have to improve the uptime, it means connected trucks. We were talking of the connectivity. Like, you will be glad to know that we are now giving 100% connected trucks. 100% of the trucks or buses that we sell today, they are all connected. They are all connected right from the factory. Like we have given ourselves to supply trucks with the live connections. So it remains always connected. Now, what is the implication of this? It means we can provide to all the truck owners or to the drivers predictive maintenance services, or we can provide them the remote diagnostic services, or we can do the over-the-air upgradation of the softwares. So a lot of productivity improvements will happen. I think these are the things which are going to drive the trucking industry so that we become more and more modern. We become more and more relevant to the customer so that it reduces the cost of the customer, it reduces the cost of ownership, which will contribute to reduce the overall logistics cost in the country. I think that will be very important if tomorrow we have to say that we have to become Atmanirbhar or we have to become relevant for the entire global economy. I think these are the things which are going to matter.
Mr. Agarwal, thank you for picking up the topic of Atmanirbharta. We'll come back to it, but before that, I'll go to Mr. Mehta of JK Paper. Sir, we've been talking about the changes that COVID has caused. During your annual results, I saw that the company has made a statement. It said that prudent investments in profitable product niches and value-added products have been made to strengthen returns for shareholders. So my question to you is that what are these product niches? And your quarterly results show the impact of COVID. But do these product niches continue to be growth drivers in a pandemic-hit world as well?
Thank you so much. I must say that after listening to the panelists, I was feeling that the paper is one sector which was impacted very badly. See, when we talk about the VUCA word here, there will be one or other some reason to create this kind of a disruption. So maybe today we are talking about the COVID, which is disrupting, but I would say that there will be one or other reason to disrupt the industry. I mean, whichever we talk. the product and the services we offer to the consumer will have to be a relevant product for that time. I must say that the paper industry, when we started paper industry maybe hundreds of years ago, that time a basic paper was needed. Thereafter, there was a journey of a paper making. I mean, the technology, the paper, different grades of paper and everything. And so today when we talk, what kind of a paper we need in the market. So we started with the traditional paper. Thereafter, we moved to the branded paper. Thereafter, we moved to the packaging paper. Thereafter, we moved to the different product. So I would say that as JK Paper, I would say the whole industry is also moving in the same direction. The JK Paper, we used to be, and we are even today known as a copier paper. And I mean, today, almost 50% of the revenue of the company comes from the copier paper. Most of you would be using in your offices, and that's the JK copier.
In our homes also.
But is it the paper which is going to be relevant maybe 10 years back, down the line? Or
is it even relevant now, Mr. Mehta, with the business hubs and education hubs like Kota Shut? Is it relevant now?
I would say that it is still very relevant. I would say that we have already reached a level of 80% pre-COVID in the month of October. So I would say that the present use of the paper is still so low, and the penetration is so low that in time to come, this is going to grow. But at the same time, in the history of organization for the legacy, I mean, you will have to plan for next 50 year or 30 year or 20 year. And the paper being so capital intensive, whenever you invest for next 50 years. You don't invest for 10 years. So what we thought is that as you asked this question, and to my mind, the relevant product in time to come is going to be, as the food is going to grow and very trusted brand, very reliable brand. So what is going to be the career for those foods? And that's the packaging paper. So what kind of a paper I introduce in the market, which become a very good product to carry the food to the end consumer. In fact, our new investment, I mean, it's a close to 2,000 crore investment. We are putting up only in one line, and that line is only a packaging paper. We are already in the packaging paper with the small capacity, but the future is the packaging paper. And that is what the investment is. As I would say that we used to carry our tiffin in the aluminum foil wrap, our rotis. Is it the future? I don't think so. So we have already developed a product where you don't have to pack your roti in the aluminum foil. It can be a different paper product, which is more hygienic. And the same is the packaging paper. Right now, the paper, you have a polythene lining just to carry the ice cream, just to carry the liquids. But in time to come, we will have a product where zero polythene lining, but it will be a food grade true lining, which will carry the product. So in fact, we need to work on this. The only thing is that when you talk about the Atmanirbhar Bharat or the new future line, I would say that the future is for a different grades of paper, but still India being so at a stage where we still educate our people in the rural sector, rural places, you need paper. And so that product will continue. But yes, there will be future for the many more products. And the JK paper is rightly placed for those kind of products in time to come.
Thank you. In fact, Mr. Mehta, it just reminded me that there are companies like Paper Boat who actually use the name paper in their own company name, in their product name, right? And they sell liquid, right?
Yes.
Fruit juice in a paper, container, which is amazing.
Absolutely.
Never thought about it before. And lots of innovations. So if there is one industry that is in the center of everybody's eye during this pandemic, it is pharmaceuticals, right? And everybody is thinking, vaccine kab aayega? When is the vaccine going to come? There was a statement sometime back, I think from the government itself, I don't know if it's true or not, that only 1/5 of India can be vaccinated in 3 years or something, which was quite scary, which means that 4 out of every 5 people you see on the street is not vaccinated. even after the vaccine comes. So, but I was mentioning to some of my colleagues earlier during the beginning of the pandemic that, pharmaceutical companies are going to be probably the busiest of all industries at this point, because this is a massive opportunity for any company that can find a virus to really catapult itself into the big pharma league, because this is a mind-blowing opportunity where you need 7 billion kind of into two, right? Each dosage of the vaccine is going to be like two doses. So I'm wondering, Sridhar, and of course, that I'm coming to you on this. What is Pfizer's stance on this whole issue, and what has Pfizer done about it, and what kind of opportunity has this pandemic opened up for a major pharma company like yours?
Thank you, Alakesh. Thank you all the panelists for being here. Thank you for the question. First of all, I wouldn't call it opportunity. I would call it a time to serve. Okay, frankly, it's not a time for opportunity. But having said that, I pray to God for an extra few seconds every day for the last 6 to 8 months. I think if there is somebody to thank, I'm thankful that I'm in the healthcare industry. I'm able to, in an industry which during the pandemic has ensured that all patients, all people population are served by the frontline doctors, so the medications, availability of medications. When most of us went through a major lockdown in late March and early April, our industry was probably shut only for 2 days. And right from the manufacturing people, procurement people, supply chain people, they all were available inside to ensure, despite all what is happening around, we were able to continuously manufacture the product and supply to the patients. So for me, I felt so nice that as a healthcare industry, we all could serve the patients what was required, and the doctors were really struggling to make things work. For me, the whole pandemic for a healthcare, I'm saying it's going to version 2. I'm using constitutional version 2 because the whole pandemic has really shaken up the system across the world, and more so in a country like India. Let me put it this way. We are lucky to have lower mortality rate, lower penetration rate, is simply because the way our structure is also there, and the way our immunity system works, and the way the spread of people are working. This is going to really change the entire landscape of healthcare across the world. So that's why I'm feeling very proud about it. Second thing, I'm absolutely proud to be a Pfizerite. I mean, there's no way, every day I thank God saying, thank God I'm in Pfizer. I've been tracking closely the way Pfizer has been developing the vaccine over the last few months. Trust me, Alakesh, it gives me goosebumps when I see the progress every day. I've never seen an organization who is working to develop a most complicated vaccine in the shortest period of time, following the best of protocol and the science behind it. And probably, if touch wood, everything goes well, we'll probably have the vaccine by late November. I mean, that's how close we are working on it. Wow. What has taught us for the world, in US, probably not in India, okay, not in US, okay. What has this whole thing taught us? The regulatory system has been challenged and has been really shortened by doing multiple activities parallelly. And that is how we're able to shorten the time to develop the vaccine. And this learning is going to help all the future pipeline to come into play. Because once the learning is established and every regulatory authority and all the people around it have learned the new ways of working, it's going to just make a future pipeline come much faster. And not only that, the vaccine is just not one. You have multiple vaccines, different stereotypes, different viruses, different bacteria. The evolution of vaccine will keep on continuing as we move along. And therefore, this process of vaccine manufacturing, different companies coming out, different innovative vaccines is going to continue for some more time. So for me, I'm as a healthcare company to be able to bring in a vaccine early to launch and also right call. Second, few things has happened which has never happened. No industry would have probably made a product at risk before the product is approved. Vaccine industry, Pfizer, has actually made the vaccine at risk and kept it ready, saying as soon as approval is available, be able to allocate to the market. Can you imagine that risk of millions of doses, cold storage, to keep it ready with, and because the way we are developing the whole process, people are confident how it can come through. That for me is a big change in the whole manufacturing process. And the technology of vaccine which is going to come in is going to change the entire manufacturing industry. Can you imagine for a country like India, you said 1.3 billion population, if the government of India, we have to deliver vaccine to so many populations, all vaccines come in cold storage conditions, ranging from 2 to 8 to minus 80. It is going to make the whole supply, the cold storage industry, right from freezers, the reefer vans to supply chain, mini refrigerators, you name the industry, which is going to, the manufacturing of supply of the cold storage is going to change in India, because no Indian can be without a vaccine, because this is absolutely life-saving. So it is going to change the way we're going to distribute and keep it. Maybe it'll take some time, but once the infrastructure is up and available, what is it going to do, Alok? It is going to change the whole concept of preventive health in the country. Because this one vaccine is going to enable the whole country to set up infrastructure to bring in more and more preventive health, adult vaccinations into the country, which was never would have happened without, unfortunately, this thing there. So for me, I wouldn't even want to use the word, but definitely healthcare industry has learned, has gone ahead of the curve, especially in trying to support and learn these kind of interactions, and is going to really make healthcare of the country fast. It has also at the same time made the patients very, very knowledgeable. Typically, what would happen is we would let the patients or a consumer come closer to the companies. Last 6 to 8 months, we have gone closer to the consumers. The consumers have become knowledgeable. Consumers have become skilled. They in a way have become very, very comforted, in the sense they know when there's a difficulty, people will come closer to me than I going to them. And that's a big change in consumerism, which is going to make a difference in all the companies changing their go-to-market strategy going forward. For example, the whole healthcare treatment model is going to change through a combination of digital and a physical meeting. A lot of treatment protocols will start happening from healthcare at home. The critical care infrastructure of hospitals, which are very struggling to build capacity, will start extending itself to healthcare at home. I know how many of you observed, recently, Government of India last month announced in addition of insurance coverage for healthcare at home to Mediclaim. Can you imagine a patient who was spending about 10 days in hospital can actually do 3 days in a hospital and 7 days at home and still get covered by insurance scheme. That has been transitioned by, and is going to enhance capacity indirectly and enhance healthcare. So for me, the whole COVID environment has changed the healthcare landscape from a traditional model to a very, very modern, absolute. It's going to make India healthier. And as long as we take advantage of that and try and work towards the future of it, I think that is what it is going to really make it happen. At the same time, we as manufacturing companies have learned a lot. My cost of operations has come down. I can do the same quality of detailing calls as a doctor through digital far better. We can save expenses so much, and therefore we can redeploy the resources to a more productive manner and make our field force more productive. Right. So according to me, this whole thing, I'm going to take it very positively, right from manufacturing to supply chain, to consumers, to employees, all four of them. And in a way, the patients and the universe are going to benefit. So that's what I would summarize.
Mr. Sridhar, we heard you, but did we also hear that you promised us a vaccine by end of November? Did you just do that?
I didn't promise you. I said if you're lucky, in US, they could probably get approvals by end of November if everything goes well.
Wow, that's great news. And I'm guessing this is news that all of us have been waiting to hear. And perhaps with that news, Mr. Sharma, people will line up outside stores now to buy more consumer durables. I mean, when we look at your results, we see that, yeah, sales have been depressed despite the fact that you've made very steady progress when it comes to reduction of fixed costs. So how are you going to strategize and drive growth? if the vaccine doesn't come by November, what is the plan? How are you looking at COVID and the opportunities from it?
Yeah, thank you so much. And Sridhar mentioned that, when he gets information on the developments, he gets goosebumps. And so was the case with me also hearing him. So
Yes.
thank you so much for this very positive update. We look forward to that. So I believe the quarter gone by has sort of surprised a lot of us when it comes to consumer durable industry. And when I go back in the month of April and May and imagine that, we were making forecasts and we were sort of trying to create some simulations that how much of impact is going to happen on consumer durable industry or electronic goods or the manufacturing itself. I think the quarter gone by is far more better than what we originally imagined. And almost all the categories, starting from the commodities like televisions or possibly mobile phones, and then the white goods, air conditioners. So April and May contribute to almost about 22%, 23% of the annual sale. While that opportunity was lost, but the pent-up demand almost came back, and refrigerators, washing machines. So some of the trends which are very clearly visible are that products which are helping consumers multitask. So it is essentially washing machines, vacuum cleaners, and then the beauty care products like trimmers and hair dryers, dishwashers. I think the demand of these products has gone up exponentially. And I'll just take a step back to just quickly give you a sense of how Panasonic is looking at this environment and specific to this pandemic, how we are sort of realigning these strategies. So when I go on the top and try to understand that what drives all of us across the world, it is our vision of creating a better life and a better world. And this essentially means a better life for people and a better world for communities. And again, when we try to translate this into our business activities, it is B2C oriented businesses and B2B oriented businesses. And many in India would not know. I think many of us know Panasonic as a consumer appliances oriented brand doing air conditioners, televisions, etc. Globally, this is only about 22% of our revenues. 78% of revenues come out of B2B oriented businesses. And I think the biggest of business for Panasonic Corporation would be within automotives doing devices, within industrial doing lithium-ion batteries and devices for manufacturing. Within our country, we do a lot of businesses. So Anchor Electrical happens to be our subsidiary. We do a lot of businesses into manufacturing. So the special purpose machines, which does SMT for mobile phone manufacturing. So we are the leaders in that space. Automotive welding robots, we are the leaders in that space. So simply speaking, I think the strategy for us to look forward will essentially have two perspectives. The first one, which actually is very important for our country and where I think the subject of self-reliant India was touched upon a couple of times, is that how do we fit in the global supply chain? And how this whole strategy from Make in India is now moving to self-reliant India. So this essentially means that now we are aligning for not only assembling the products in the country. So for almost 95% of the products which we sell, we already manufacture them in the country. However, now we are also looking at backward integrating. And there, I believe the success will lie in how we can create technology partnerships, especially with the small and medium enterprises of the country. And second is, in this whole process, create economies of scale and make ourselves globally competitive for exports. And that might happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is one part of our strategy. Second is within the country, the supply chains. So one is manufacturing, second is logistics, and third is retail. And I'm extremely happy to share with you that we are now aligning our strategies to create digital solutions for all these three spaces. So that's how we are looking at this situation in the time to come.
Okay, thank you very much, Manish. And I'll come to Sandeep. Sandeep, you've heard everybody. There's a lot of work going on towards innovations, towards new, I won't say new business models, but new tweaks in business models. And almost everybody is talking of digital, as a means to, whether it's cars or electronic products, even milk, right? And pharmaceutical, of course, is completely driven by digital technologies and supercomputers, heavy duty computing and all that. So you mentioned in your opening talk about how technology can help identify new sources of revenue, right? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, because the goal of manufacturers isn't only rapid recovery, right? But it's also how to progress to drive future growth. So how do you see businesses adapting, and leveraging technology to find new revenue sources?
So let me get into it in a couple of different perspectives, right? So manufacturing companies, they are, I think this is not just manufacturing companies, but I think anyone in business today, I think with the extreme digitization that we are going through and the acceleration of digitization that's continuing, you are dealing with a very different nature of customers, right? And so everyone is trying to understand their customers better. So here again, through technologies, if you can use advanced data analytics and others to understand that customer and the evolving needs better, you can drive and enable customization at scale. Now, this customization at scale is expected to create new products and services through these digital engagement channels that will not be, that can't be met through traditional strategies. And as a matter of fact, one of the points that Vinod made, I think is very real, which is if we capture these technologies like sensor technology, Internet of Things and others, there are data sets that are going to be available that we can harness to create new business models and revenue opportunities. He mentioned something about predictive maintenance, for example. How do you get into doing predictive maintenance at scale through understanding, sensor data, automated data, and so on and so forth? I'll take that a step further. I mean, I've spent a lot of my life in financial services and insurance industries. I mean, I believe that this notion of connected technologies, connected supply chains and others is going to fundamentally shift the management of risk. Today we have insurance policies, even for supply chains, factories, and so on and so forth, for managing the risk of loss. With these technologies and the data that is now becoming available, you can actually create policies to manage the risk of prevention, which then in turn open up the services models that are going to be required to manage this risk of prevention. So if you can, and there are companies that are doing that. There's a company in Germany today that actually has actually created an IoT-based set of homes for seniors, which they are offering those insights and services as preventative services to companies that are either insuring those seniors or to companies where the caregivers or the people who are taking care of the seniors, they want this data to make sure that they are being, able to drive preventative services, etc. So there is a whole services economy, which I think, and a set of opportunities will open up to do this. I mean, I'll give you one more example, and this is, here and now. So Maruti and other leading automotive players, for instance, they have designed an intelligent advanced information platform for customers, which is enabling a new connect between the customer, car, the family, manufacturers, and using smartphones. These diverse features offer customers a convenient access to detailed information about their cars, even when they are away, thereby extending extreme sense of safety and security. And the technology is not limited to the auto manufacturer alone. It opens the avenue for a data marketplace. And services like these can be capitalized by, as I mentioned, insurance providers, fleet management companies, and other connected safety services. This is, again, a great example of how manufacturing companies are making in India, for India, and then for the world.
Right. Absolutely, Sandeep. And we come to the second talking point with that, which is where we will talk about how the Indian government and private enterprises, that is, collaborate to help manufacturing move towards this 25% share of our GDP, the stated goal that we have. Currently, if you look at the manufacturing sector, it is about 14% of the Indian GDP, and it is not even growing year on year. We don't see a growth year on year, actually. So do you feel that initiatives like Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat will make a difference? I'll come to Rajiv Chhabra with that question. Do you feel that these two ideas, which is Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India, perhaps also contradict each other at some level?
And after Rajiv, this question is open to the whole group.
Yeah, so Chetna, I would say, the target is laudable. It's a good idea. Manufacturing generates a lot of jobs, and also I think the opportunity is huge. So if I can answer this question in two, three verticals, one thing is we have to see what's the potential in the local market, in the domestic market, and how do we maximize that. And second is the global market. Can we be part of the global market? And I'm sure in all the sectors what we represent here, if we look at the global pie is huge. As an example, in four-wheeler, I'm talking only cars. I'm not talking about trucks and buses, big buses, what Vinod makes. But the market is, as an example, around 85 million units per year, whereas the Indian market is only 3 million. And we export approximately 500,000, so the global pie is huge. So one is about the Indian potential. The second is about the global potential. And how do we achieve that? Now, again, the target is good. The goal is good, whatever you may call it. But the fact is that, from the country's perspective, I think we need to, when you talk about Make in India or Atmanirbharta, I think we need to go into details about which sectors, which goods, which commodities are very essential, important, strategic from country's safety perspective, and make sure that you make it here. Let's say it's 10%. I'm oversimplifying my answer here, okay? So let's say that's 10% or 15% or 20% of the goods, as an example. But 80% actually don't fall into that category, where you can actually make here and also export. So from that perspective, you need to be part of globalization. And what is globalization? Globalization is exchange of ideas, people, trade, technology. Nobody can stop it, in my opinion. At this point of time, the flavor maybe become more local globally. I think global leaders are talking about, so stars are aligned in that way. Maybe everybody's talking about more local. But I think nobody can stop this globalization. And why would you do that? Because the potential is huge, in globalization. So I think in certain areas and sectors, we should focus on protecting our interest, and which is important for the country, safety. But then rest, so for export also, by the way, you need to import certain things, add value, and export. And then again, I think India, from the manufacturing perspective, have to identify certain areas or niche, that these are the niches where Indian goods can be very, very competitive. Again, you can't be competitive in each area. So you identify those and do more. And from that perspective, a lot of detailing needs to be done. So on one hand, we can always say we have done a lot, we have achieved a lot of good things are happening, a lot of new policies are happening. On the other hand, potential is huge. We can do much more. I personally feel we Indians are probably one of the best brains in the world, but together, have we achieved our real potential? I think we can do a lot more, in my opinion. So on the policy side, long-term policy side, logistics side, Vinod talked about logistics. We can improve so much in that area. So I think a lot of detailing needs to be done in everything. So I will not go into the slogans, but I will talk about lots and lots can be done. I think still potential is huge.
Yeah, it's an open discussion. Yeah, Sridhar.
Oh, thank you, Alpesh.
We will welcome to you after Sridhar.
I've got many dreams, but I'll only share 2 dreams here today with you, okay? One dream is, I've been sitting in many webinars, etc., or anything where, various state governments, promote Make in India to getting a lot of investments in the country. The pitch we make is, we are a low-cost country and therefore come to India. I want to change, I wish we could change it. Cost is good, but cost is not the lever to get people into the country. I think we should promote quality, ease, and reliability as a mantra to get people to the country. Cost makes us a little bit more on the lower side. We have a lot more capabilities and skills, like Rajiv said. We have a lot of intelligence out here, and therefore let's change from a cost concept to a quality, ease, and reliability. That's one dream. I hope we can make it. The second dream I have is, if India has transformed very fast from an agricultural economy to a service to a consumer economy. We have, to some extent, manufacturing sector, we have bypassed a little bit faster than what most developed economies have. And therefore, my dream is, I wake up one fine day, I see government taking infrastructure and investing ahead of the curve in making roads and infrastructure related to it, to then tell people, I have made my job. Now you can travel 400 kilometers in about 1 hour's time. Don't worry about travel. I've given you necessary infrastructure. Now come and invest. For me, that is the change. If you make investors, individual people, our kitty is limited. And therefore, if you have to spend the limited money, I want to maximize the money there. And therefore, it is the government who can actually lead with infrastructure to make those things work. And I'm hoping that really happens fairly quickly. And therefore, government should really start over the next 10 years, make that happen. Which means it also needs to really free up the land acquisition, the laws around it. They have to make their life happen. I mean, I love democracy to a large extent. At some point of time, democracy frustrates me because nothing really works beyond a particular point of time. So my dream is to really make sure the government is able to take the big, bold moves and to make Atmanirbhar and Make in India work. Government has to lead the front. By making statements, it is not going to work out here. And therefore, for me, that
like
is
managing the API thing, because 70% of APIs come from China.
Let me talk about API for you. It's a great point you're raising. Why are we doing API? Because we want to be self-sufficient. No, that's wrong. We do not want to be self-sufficient. We want to be leaders in API in the world. If you do not think of scale and exports, for domestic consumption, your API plant will be so small, your scale won't work, your cost efficiency won't work. And we will learn from other countries to say their API plants like mini towns and cities. And they don't make for themselves, they make for the world. And because they do it at that scale, and there when you do that, entrepreneurs cannot do it on their own. The government needs to really say, we don't want API parks, we want API towns, we want API townships. Then only the API is sufficient. Otherwise, it won't happen. So I think that is the vision change we all have to make in terms of scale and thinking. And then therefore, the government will have to work in terms of the funding, the finance, the interest. Then we are looking at Atmanirbhar and self-sufficient really coming to fore. I'm sorry, I spoke too much, but...
No, absolutely fine. I'll go to Mr. Agarwal. He wanted to make a point. So you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Fundamentally, if you look at, I'll address it in two parts. First is Atmanirbhar and then the 25%, 25% of GDP. If you look at Atmanirbhar, why do companies import? Basically, fundamentally, there are two reasons. One is this, that it may be due to the cost reasons, or the other could be that that technology or that part itself is not available. The cost reasons, of course, still you can force, you can put anti-dumping or you can put a lot of things and then you can address that and stop that. But as far as the technology is concerned, or some of the things, if they are not available here, no, those are the things one has to see how do we get those parts here in India. For example, for auto industry, when we moved from BS4 to BS6, our import content has gone up from maybe 1 to 2% to 10%. That is the change that has happened in the auto industry, especially I can talk of the CVs. It is huge increase. Now, why this increase has happened? It's not that the auto industry wanted to increase these imports, because some of those parts, they are just not available, like electronic parts or substrates which are there, or there are very sophisticated, BS6 related.
So how do we get that manufacturing in India, Mr. Agarwal? How do we make that happen?
That's what I'm coming to that. Now, there two things are involved. One is the technology. The technology is not available. Still, you can get the technology. But for those parts to manufacture at the cost, you need huge scale. Now, some of those large MNCs, if they have set up the operations for serving the entire world, they have set up some operations in China, or someone has set up in Europe, or someone has set up in the US. From there, serving the entire world. Now, you have to create that scale here. You have to create that sort of now that company has to stop that production from there and then bring that entire production here. It means huge investment. Then the investment which is already made. So I think that's one challenge, that you do need the scale, you need the technology, and then of course you need to serve the entire world from here.
So are you trying to say that there has been a mismatch between policy and vision?
No, policy is the starting point. I think this vision is when you start dreaming, only then it happens. So it's we started dreaming that we need to be Atmanirbhar, or we need to have the.
So, if I can just put it in perspective, in my words, what Mr. Vinod is saying, and I try to say, India imports 100 items across the industries. Now, do you expect government to support all the 100 imports to be substituted by local things in India and to support and to have world-class scale for all the 100 items? No, that's not possible. So that's why maybe the Indian government has to prioritize that out of 100 items, maybe they can make only 25 based on whatever criteria, the need or need or demand or competitiveness or the niche or security or whatever, right? Based on criteria. So on these 25 things, then you think like a global scale. It may be some pharmaceutical APIs, what Sridhar was talking about. It can be some electronic components of automotive. It can be some parts of phones or some part, but you can't have a carpet bombing approach to all the 100 items, So I think the vision is good, and that's a open. Now we need to go into the detail and have a clear strategy about which parts or which industries or which parts of the industries we need support, and the government provides the support, and rest probably keeps doing the globalization or keeps doing the business the way they are doing.
Absolutely, Rajiv, you have put it very well. Basically, we'll have to identify that what is our competitive strength, where we can do better, and that's what we should then get it here.
So I'll come to Manish first, and then Anil.
Thank you so much. So I think taking forward from
Vinod wanted to finish. One sec.
Second point, I wanted to talk on the 25%. How this 25% can be part of the GDP.
Once you finish, we'll go to Manish and then Anil.
Now, again, fundamentally, if you have to increase the share of manufacturing, it means you need to produce more, all these goods. And if you need to produce more, either you have to consume here or you have to export. I think these are the two fundamental things. The consumption has to increase in India. Now, how the consumption can increase, income levels have to be more. So I think then the second thing is exports. I think unless you start exporting, unless you become part of more and more globalized economy, unless your global trade goes up, I think this dream of increasing the share of manufacturing, again, it will be very difficult. So you have to become global. You have to export more. You have to produce the technologies. You have to produce the quality. You have to absolutely meet the expectations of the global customer, and then of course supplement with the consumption in locally, and that consumption will keep on going up as the income levels improve. So 3% will
Manish.
So
Tom. Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. So very similar to what Mr. Rajiv mentioned, and I'll share and reflect upon my experience of last 6 to 7 months, and possibly in the capacity of chair with the Electronics Manufacturing Committee of FICCI. So a very structured approach I see has been happening over the last 6 months, and under DPIIT, there is a steering committee which has been formed, and a cross-functional team of people coming in from government and also from industry and industry chambers are now brainstorming since last 5 to 6 months, and a very similar approach what Mr. Rajiv mentioned of identifying areas which can be focused from variety of perspectives, and some knowledge partners have been allocated. And I'll just quickly give you one example very much in line with that. So when you look at the air conditioners industry, our country is on a demand of approximately 6.5 to 7 million units. And we manufacture about 5 million units of that demand within our country. When we compare ourselves with China, they manufacture 110 million air conditioners annually, and they export 80 million out of their country. When it comes to value addition, which is happening out of the 5 million units which we manufacture here, it is just 20% localization, 80% of components are imported. Now, this is short an opportunity, because penetration level of air conditioners in our country is less than 5%. This is going to explode. So this is one of the sectors which has been identified, and a very structured approach that how do we look at both tariff or non-tariff interventions to ensure that the initial part of the demand is catered through the country. And then simultaneously, how the policy interventions can support backward integration to happen. And eventually, with economies of scale, how can we sort of start to export? And finally, before I conclude, yes, I completely agree what Sridhar mentioned. I think the mindset has to change from mere cost to quality. And in my own words, I say that the concept should be total cost of ownership. So essentially, how do we look at the cost of ownership throughout the life cycle of a product? So this mindset change across both consumers and B2B has to happen in our country for us to really evolve as top class manufacturers and globally competitive in the time to come. Thank you.
I'll go to Mr. Anil Chaudhary. You have raised your hand, but I'll take Manish, the point that Manish raised to you, which is we've recently seen very focused incentives as far as electric manufacturing in India is concerned, with the aim that we should become more export oriented. Do you think those are the kind of interventions that we were looking at the government for? Mr. Chaudhary? So you're on.
Yeah, sorry, because no, for sure, I fully align with what you're saying. But what I wanted to share was a different view in terms of manufacturing and how we can accelerate the manufacturing in India. One is that we wait for all the government policies to be ideal and, government taking the steps and other thing. The other is taking probably a midterm, long-term view, and that's what we as a company has adopted a strategy for, increasing the manufacturing in India. In fact, in this pandemic time, we have closed one of our largest investment in India of acquiring L&T's electrical and automation business. And today, India is number 3 manufacturing, country for Schneider Electric worldwide. We have 28 manufacturing sites. And we are doing, almost what we are manufacturing here, almost 50% of we are exporting, and with the, bringing L&T electrical automation in part of our business, we are accelerating that. Now, what I'm trying to say, a different view is that India is a country where for sure, any short-term view doesn't work. And that's what we have seen in the past. And we as an organization has taken a mid-term, long-term view that market in India, whatever we talk, whatever segment we talk, it's still at a very small scale. It's going to go and increase further. What will make India different is the demographic assets which we have, training and upskilling the skills with which our technicians, engineers are coming out of the factories, out of the universities, how we can make them much more quality focus, much more focus on technologies, and use the knowledge and digital knowledge which our country has to get the scale of the overall manufacturing which we can do for India and India for globe. And there, I think the leaders, industry leaders, especially the companies where the headquarters or are outside India, or multinational as we call it, their local leaders play a very strong role, being vocal for local. Because government policies, government ambassadors will go, but if my chairman has to invest in India, he will look at me, he will look at the team which he has in India, that can you guys deliver? Can you scale up? Can you establish some world-class facilities and standards and qualities which you can do it? For sure, India will benefit. And that's exactly the objective of Make in India or Innovate in India. When I'm talking of the teams, I'm talking end-to-end. It's not only manufacturing. You need good innovation teams. You need good production teams. You need good support of MSC, supply chain, all, and you need to scale up them as well. And you need to probably also work with the academia, with the universities to bring out those kind of, engineers and skills what you needed. And so there is a way from top down and there's a way for bottom up. I think both these actions have to happen. I'm not saying that government should not be bringing in policies. Government should not be bringing in more and more, foreign trade policies which are friendly for, companies to take a decision. But at the same time, I think the companies which are looking at a long-term view at India, which is, 1.3 billion, the market, whatever potential we have, still we have a limit that we have explored is limited. We are still a developing nation. I think 10 years face of India will be totally different. Any segment, any infrastructure, any area where we are saying we have multiples of growth to be done. So this will be done both with the government actions and the industry taking sometimes the risk, calculated risk, but that's what will be required. It will not happen in an ideal world and in an ideal situation. And that as per our experience goes, any markets where we have been stronger, it takes both ways. And that's the strategy we are following. And that strategy our group is following. And this is where one of the largest investment done in a single country by the group is in India in the last 6 months.
I'll come to Mr. Sridhar. Before that, I'll go to Mr. Sodhi. He had raised his hand before. While we are talking about manufacturing being taken to 25% of GDP, so it works both ways. We have to scale up domestic production. We also have to export a large quantity of what we manufacture. You're sitting on thousands of crores, thousands of tons of excess skimmed milk powder.
I don't know. No, let me tell you. I think I have been hearing all the panelists, and I can only say, in summary, I can gather there is a lot of potential in India, and all Indian foreign company, Indian company want to produce in India, but there are bottlenecks. I'll give you one example, Sridhar ji. In dairy also till mid-70s, same situation was there. That time the farmers, in this case the manufacturer, the policy maker, and the political leadership decided that we have to become Atmanirbhar. And that time they make 25 years plan. So if you want to become Make in India, it's not 2 years, 3 years, 5 years plan. You have to make 25, 30, 35 years plan how to become Atmanirbhar, how to become Make in India. And I agree. Make in India, local for the local is not because we are made in India. You have to first match the quality, you have to get that latest technology, and in India, affordability. And affordability will come from the scale. So like other panelists said, you have to get, if we are importing more than, 3 million ACs, why we are importing? So that one is to see. It is not because the technology, it is affordability is also a better thing. So I think one has to consider this. And coming to your question of skim milk powder, it is simply because during COVID we procured 17% more milk, and this Horeca segment was closed. A lot of surplus milk which we converted to commodities. So don't worry, India is a country of 1.35 billion. And the summer comes, this is all evaporate. It is not even 0.1% of India's production. So don't worry. We cry a lot. We tell everybody because let us get some benefits from the government so we can give some incentives to the industry so that we can export. But let me tell you, firstly, we should have trust in our 1.35 billion people purchasing power, their skills and the natural resources, and now also very stable political leadership. And with all these factors put together, I think a lot of foreign investors will be interested. You take any, whether automotive or food processing or logistics, lot of investments are coming, and I think most of the industry is open. So I am very optimistic about the industry, not only in food, but manufacturing also, or automotive, anything you want.
Okay. Thank you very much. Come to Sridhar. You had a point to make, and after that, I'll come to Mr. Mehta. He's been quiet for quite some time.
No, I think we all have been very nice to each other. I think I want to be a little controversial and stir a little bit of.
Yeah, we love that.
Go ahead.
So, we all feel that we are making quality product. Okay. Frankly, I'm saying no, because India has got two quality. One quality we make for India, one quality we make for abroad. Let's change that concept. Let's have only one quality. Let's take US. US makes a medicine in US. When they want to make medicine outside and bring it to US, they have US FDA. Why do they have US FDA? Because they want all the citizens of the US want to have the same quality medicine. Even though the medicine they're importing is cheaper than what they make there, they say the quality I will not compromise. Now, what I'm trying to say is, In India, we end up setting up a special plants for exports, special for domestic, because we want to manage on the cost structure. I'm saying, no, let's make one plant at scale. Let's try and bring in differential pricing in the country. Let's tell our Indian consumers, it's a time we offer you high quality product, value of the product. Take Starbucks, for example. Did Starbucks, when they come into India, did they set up a different chai stall? No, they set up the same Starbucks, what is there anywhere in the world? And they're doing well. And what does Starbucks do? They started leading a revolution of coffee and tea drinking. Today, a cutting chai is available, but the entrepreneurs set up fancy chai. And the consumers are there for it because consumers are seeing a value for what they're getting. So I think if in India, if we're able to demonstrate to the world that we value quality, there's only one quality, you'll automatically get people coming into the country, making India a good manufacturing hub. Without that quality consciousness and one quality, it's good to talk about it, but nobody will trust India. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, great. Mr. Mehta, while you talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make in India and what your view is on that, what I also want to, there's a question that is coming from the audience for you. And for you and Mr. Sodhi also. And basically, it's about the rural economy. Like JK paper is promoting farm forestry, something that we discussed yesterday also, and changing the lives of many rural families, right? It goes, the same goes for Amul's cooperative model, which supports small families. So India, being a rural country with, as we all know, most of our population is there. What are your thoughts on the perspective of the rural economy? And how can Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat, while we talk about that, how can they benefit the rural people?
Okay, thank you. I was listening carefully all the other panelists, and in fact, when we talk about the 25% share of manufacturing in the GDP, I would say that from almost close to 15 years we have been talking. When the Honorable Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, he was the Prime Minister at that time, our share of manufacturing was close to 16%. And that time, a thought paper was that how do we go to 25%? And for so many years, we are still talking. And from 16%, it has come down to 14% or 15%. We need to do the true introspection that why the hell, even after 10 years of our talking, we have not inched up even 1 or 2%. So that's one. In fact, the intent is very good. We need to find the enablers to some extent. I would say, Raj Satta ke bina kabhi business nahi hua hai. And what we have thought is that there are policies intervention, but these policies intervention are not truly the enablers today. Because either these policies are on a piece of paper or those policies are not truly becoming the enabler for creating those kind of manufacturing sectors in the country. So we need to understand. And as rightly said by the panelists, we need to understand the competitiveness of the products. We can't have all the products competitive in the country. So we need to understand. So that's one part. Particularly the paper sector, I can give you the example that the biggest pulp mill in our country, biggest pulp mill when I'm talking in our country is something around 3 lakh ton, which is, 300,000 ton, 0.3 million ton. And the biggest pulp mill overseas, I personally saw a pulp mill, 2 million ton pulp mill. See the scale. And the reason being, when you want to set up a pulp mill, you have to have a plantation. You have to have the availability of resources. The 2 million ton pulp mill in Brazil, it is centered by 75 or 50 kilometers of plantation. That means the long-term concession of the land is given to the people for the plantation. So they did their own plantation, and their own plantation, in the midst of plantation, there is a pulp mill. Now, when we talk about a pulp mill in India, there is no concession given to, concession in the sense the long-term leases for doing plantation in the country. So no one can do plantation on the land. It is only that if you have a private land, which is, I mean, the government will not give you more than whatever the land you can think of. So there is no plantation. So we realizing this, that still, how do we become a competitive? And rightly you said that the rural economy, we want to have the right kind of a balance where we have a manufacturing facility and also create an employment. Because always there has to be a tussle. I mean, if we want to be competitive, we need to be far more mechanized and automatic because we want to be competitive. When you want to be competitive and you automize, then the rate of employment comes down because you have an automatic plant, the less number of people. So how do you handle the employment when you are in a rural area where the lot of expectation from you is on employment, that you will provide employment. Whereas when you put up a plant where you can't provide the employment to the people, let's say a new machine, where a new machine of, let's say, 2 lakh ton of paper, I'm hardly employing 400 people. Whereas in old days, 2 lakh ton of paper machine means 2,000 people. So 2,000 vis-a-vis 400. So there is an issue. So what do we do? So what we thought is that, how do we engage the rural people and without creating the disturbance? And that is what we thought from last almost 10 years now, very actively. We are engaging all these people in our plantation. So what we did, we worked a model of a farm forestry model, where the land belongs to the farmers, which is not otherwise used for the other crops. Because we need to understand the revenue stream of a farmer. And the farmer has to be rewarded. Otherwise, why should they do the plantation? So we did a model where, can I provide a better revenue source to a farmer and provide them a right kind of a material so that they are rewarded? So more or less, we are working with 75,000 farmers, and those farmers, they are doing the plantation for us. We have a proper buyback and we guarantee them. We provide them the right kind of a clone. Imagine a plant which used to be harvested in 7 years' time, 10 years back. We are harvesting today 3 and 3.5 years' time. And the farmer income, which used to be 10 years back, is more than 1.5 times, even in 3.5 years' time. So that is why the farmer is attracted towards plantation. And in fact, today, I mean, what I'm talking is the biggest differentiator for us. We are most competitive. We are the lowest cost producer in the country. And we can compete with any of the global players because you have the right kind of source of material available to you. You can control the quality of material. And this has created the right kind of engagement to the rural people. So there's no pressure on employment. There's a good balance between the farming community and the other people. And at the same time, win-win.
Right.
So those kind of a thing we have done at our own. But I am, as a president of the association, I have been working with the government. There are lakhs of hectares of degraded forest land is lying idle. There is no plantation. We have been talking that this land can be gainfully utilized. In fact, we gave a proposal to the ministry, and the Prime Minister is also aware about it, that if the degraded forest land is planted, 15 lakhs of people can be gainfully engaged in only the plantation activity. And that can create a huge source for manufacturing. And this is how we create manufacturing in the country.
Absolutely. I'll go to Mr. Patel. You have been very silently listening to everybody as we talk about India, whether it has the right mix of policy, regulation, skill, and quality to transition to a higher percentage of manufacturing of the GDP. But sir, as we transition, a higher percentage of the jobs in manufacturing will give importance to cognitive abilities and system skills over physical abilities. So how can we prepare the industry workforce to succeed in an increasingly automated world?
So I'll answer your question, but before that, I just wanted to come back and just echo a point that I think Sridhar made. I think this notion about if we are serious about being Atmanirbhar and sort of make in India, for India and for the world, this notion about adopting the mindset of building the right quality in India that doesn't distinguish between whether you're manufacturing for India or for the world, I think is really important. And I think some of the examples that he cited, we see that all day long in our business, because we do a lot of that in software manufacturing, if you will, in India for the world. And we cannot distinguish between what we are building for India versus what we are building for the world. And I think that is really important, which then brings me to the question that you asked, which is, if we think about the last several months that we've been working through, I think technology, whether we like it or not, has become the unifying force. I keep calling it the Sutradhar that is actually helping us navigate through these paradigms that we are seeing, both within COVID and then what we will see as a new normal. So in an all-pervasive digital world, right, this will lead to a major shift in the talent requirement that is going to have, the need for candidates with the right kind of automation, the right kind of cognitive skills. I talked about some of the relevance that is going to become, the relevance of data and analytics, which is going to be really, really important. So, according to the India Skill Report of 2019, only 45.6% of the youth that's graduating from educational institutions, they are employable. I mean, what this reflects is a massive shortage of skilled workforce in the country. And I think the importance now of making sure that the youth that is being educated and how we are actually skilling people for the industry-ready talent that is needed for the new normal, right? That is going to be really, really important in terms of getting people educated in technology skills, automation skills, and others. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We've actually been doing some work with the National Skill Development Corporation, NSDC, to strengthen the talent pipeline by offering sort of the open PTech platform that they're driving. So this is a free digital education platform that's focused on emerging technologies and professional development. And in addition to other courses, there are also IBM curated courses are being offered through the NSDC's eSkill India portal. And I believe that these are some of the skills that are going to be relevant. As this workforce emerges and we start driving more and more automation across our manufacturing and supply chains. In addition, as we make the promise of Industry 4.0 real, the ability to imagine these connected supply chains, the ability to sort of make them work, the ability to sort of understand the data needs and analytics around that is going to become, sort of more and more important. And I fundamentally believe that these skills today, I think we have always compartmentalized education, I think, over the years, right? But I believe that some of the skills around data, artificial intelligence, automation, and some of these others, we should inculcate them at a much early age. So, I mean, one of the things that we've been doing, and actually many of our other technology, many of the technology companies have been doing this, but we've actually collaborated with CBSE, for example, to develop an AI curriculum as an elective subject for class 11 and 12 to actually provide foundational knowledge of artificial intelligence, skills like design thinking, data fluency, critical thinking, ethical decision-making, etc. And what is interesting is when you actually put kids through this, right? And you and we've actually this last couple of years, what we've been doing is we've been running a hackathon where they actually build solutions and we run it as an open-ended competition. And then the top 10, we are actually having them go through an internship program, within our, and this year it was all virtual, but we ran a virtual internship program for a few weeks in our Bangalore offices with mentors, right? Which I think is going to become very, very critical. I think we should be inculcating that kind of education. And clearly the government is, I think, in one of his addresses, our Honorable Prime Minister, he made this point around Samsiksha, Sarva Shiksha and Shresh Shiksha, and doing that in India, which I think is going to become, really, really relevant as we start to build the skills that are going to be needed for this new era of manufacturing, automation, and others that we can drive.
Right. Thank you, Sandeep. We are already 10 minutes over time. So we'll just take a quick 5 minutes. There's one important question that I must absolutely ask all of you. I'll start with Anil and Manish, and then we'll go to the others, which is, we have been talking a lot about digital, in this conversation today, and the need for digital skills as well as adoption of the right technologies and all that. But quickly, just a quick round to all the panelists in terms of what are really your, let's say, the top 3 investment priorities in terms of digital transformation? Because as we move towards, the factories that Mr. Mehta was talking about, as we move towards more, greater amount of digital within our processes, what really are the things that are top of your mind in terms of digital? Anil?
Yeah, so thanks. First, of course, we all have discussed about that, and of that digital has been the way in the last 8 months. And probably, as we all know, the data is available, how as a country we have leapfrogged in terms of digitization of our society. Now, priorities for us, first, most important is all processes, supply chain, the manufacturing, our, all the distribution centers, including the sales processes. We are fully going on digital platforms. Connection with the customer. I mean, we all know, and we are not different than any of the industry, that I personally have connected from end of March till end of May through various digital connects. The number of customers which I've personally connected, I would have normal time, I would have not even imagined. Because we have to go, we have to plan the trips, we have to plan the meeting, we have to plan the agenda. This was the trend. Now you align and then you are being efficient, connecting with all of those. So all that is now on a much more accelerated path. When I talk about the agility of the supply chain, this is end-to-end connection between our suppliers till our customers. We want the full visibility of the whole supply chain, which is all what we call as Industry 4.0 application. And I talk about 2 lighthouses which we have made already with full automation in our factory, one in Hyderabad, one in Bangalore. This is to demonstrate to the larger industry how you can have end-to-end automation and artificial intelligence working for you to bring in productivity. And more importantly, the sustainability and the reliability and the quality, consistency of that, that's what we talk. That's the second part of the initiative we have taught. Third, sorry?
No, go on.
No, third, what I'm saying is more on the point of the people aspect, because it is true that, a normal engineer probably in the present world will not be able to just fit in, be productive. We are now accelerating the knowledge and even started some program in the last 6 months with some of the universities where we are supporting how more and more acceleration of all these robotics, artificial intelligence, and our platform which are much more connected to take it forward. That can be part of the curriculum, and we are working with that and taking that into the we get all those new employees, new engineers who are joining us, coming and accelerating this in a much more faster way. That's how we are taking on our digital journey.
Right.
Sure. So being a technology company, I think there are 2 perspectives. First is opportunity and the other one is capability. When it comes to opportunity, I think Panasonic is in a very unique position, which I'm sure many of us would agree, that to provide living spaces solutions, I mean, residential solutions, and make them more digital. I think with Anchor Electricals on one axis and the consumer durable portfolio on the other axis, we are in an excellent position to sort of create digitalization of the living space itself to provide a comfortable, convenient, energy efficient, smarter living. So we recently introduced a platform called Mirai, which is about smart homes. And the logical first step is sort of IoTification of the entire range of products, and then look at analytics to happen for consumers. That is the first part. The second part is capability building. And I think this might be a challenge for a lot of organizations So again, our operations are very similar to a lot of panelists, where we have manufacturing capabilities, then the back-end operations, and then the front-end operations, wherein the environment is very fragmented, if not to the extent of Dr. Sodhi's Amul Corporation, where I think it's millions of people out there in the field. But we have, for example, about 4,000 sales promoters dealing every day with consumers, and so forth. So how do you bring that data back into insights for future product planning? This is one of the challenges. Then the other challenge is that possibly in last couple of decades, when digital convergence started to happen, ERP was very central to the business considerations. But then slowly it started to become very fragmented. So more business applications started to take shape. So I think the challenge with people like us is that how do we look at unifying the entire digital footprint which exists across the organization for a variety of functions, and then let that data talk to each other. So I think that is the kind of challenge which we are now looking at addressing in the time to come.
Yeah. Sridhar and Mr. Dr. Sodhi both have raised their hand.
Yes. We go to Mr. Sodhi
Okay.
first. He had raised his hand. Sridhar.
Let me tell you, during this COVID, our trust, need, and importance of digital transformation increased manifold, and which is resulting into more investment in the future. See, one side of digital connect or digital transformation, you all are aware, whether in manufacturing or logistics or in distribution or retailing or sales. So no doubt we are also doing like you are doing. But the other digital connect or transformation which we have used up to the hilt is connecting with the 3.6 million milk producers, from where we are collecting twice in a day at 18,500 milk collection center through 10,000 road milk tankers for milk collection. And I'm thankful to IBM, Sandeep is there. Overnight, when we were under lockdown, whatever transformations are required in our SAP and our system and connecting is done. See, we were knowing at all these centers where milk is being collected or where milk is more, that which tanker has been stopped at which checkpost in Goa or Punjab or Gujarat. So which SP or which IG or which collector we have to connect. So what is the next is how to use AI in this further. Now we have got digital connect right from farmer to 1.35 billion people. But now what is required is how to make investments more so that AI can be used in faster and speedier digital taking decision. So I think in the future, the confidence and trust in digital and remote has increased tremendously, and no organization will now become conducive in investments in digital or AI things.
Right. I'll go to Sridhar from here. Yeah.
I have no three. I have only one thing which Pfizer is working on is to transform the way we will supply medicines, serve patients, or bring therapy to patients in a very, very transformational way. Our objective is going forward, patient should go minimum outside the house to the hospital only when required. Bring the therapy and the treatment closer to the patient's house, leveraging digital, not just only in urban, but also in remote or rural, leveraging digital. We will work with the big digital partners who can create an end-to-end ecosystem for us, who can actually say, today, when you go to OPD, a person wastes 1 day. Oncology patients travel kilometers and kilometers, or multiple kilometers coming in there. Yes, there has to be a doctor connect, no doubt about it, but minimize the doctor connect and reduce the pressure in the OPDs and doctors, and at the same time, bring the therapy closer to them and make a patient feel not like a patient, but like a consumer. Make them feel nice about it. That's the thing we're working on to really take the treatment closer to the patients.
Yes.
Anil wants to say something?
Yeah, Alkesh, no, sorry, because I have to leave now. I thank all the panelists. Very happy to join because I have another call already joined and I have to join there. I'm already 15 minutes late. Sorry for that.
Sorry for keeping you waiting, Anil. Just hang on for 5 seconds. Nidhi, you're there? Yeah, let's do the group photo. You see, when in an on-ground event also, we do a group photo, right? Yahan bhi karna chahiye. Everybody look at the camera and smile. And Nidhi is going to take a few screenshots.
Thank you so much, Nidhi.
Thank you. Thank you, Anil, very much.
And very pleased to connect with all my fellow panelists. And thank you, Kesh.
Thank you so much for taking time out.
Thank you very much.
We go to Mr. Agarwal. You had raised your hand. You wanted to tell us about the top 3 priorities for you when it comes to technology adoption.
No, I think this digitalization is going to create a very strong foundation, and it will change the entire business model. And we have in our organization, like service revenue is going to play more and more important role in future. If today it is just around maybe 5 to 7% of our total top line, it is going to become 20 to 25%. And that is going to happen through digitalization. I would only like to say that. So digitalization and connectivity, and these are going to be the absolutely the things which will drive the revenue in future.
Raji.
No, I think I don't have to say anything.
You're all about technology. MG is all technology.
So I think I would just say we are focusing on consumer and supply chain. These are the 2 top areas we're focusing on. But I'll be slightly cynical when I say, I think we all know the right words. We all know, we all know where we need to put in the efforts. But the fact is that whatever systems we have even right now, unfortunately, lack of education or training or awareness, people even don't use that. So if we may have the best ERP system in our factories, but still there are Excel sheets in the factory, right? So
yeah.
How do we eliminate the Excel sheet?
Yeah, absolutely right.
So I think we need to go this subject, we can talk, but we need to go deep into the issues, and we are focusing on consumer and supply chain.
Mr. Mehta, last word from you on your priorities.
I mean, the paper has been a very traditional manufacturing sector. I mean, very, very traditional, but since it is a very capital intensive, so my first priority on the digitalization is the manufacturing, because this is where you get the maximum out of advantage, whatever we can think of. So this is one. The second priority is certainly the farmer. I mean, how do we create a kind of a data bank for the farmers so that there is some transparency and some advantage can be given to the farmer on the source of data. And the next is certainly the front line. I mean, how do we reach to the consumer in a far more transparent manner rather than just the middle layer of financiers in the paper trail?
Okay.
Absolutely. I think we've completely run out of time, though I think we could go on for another hour. At least I could go on for another hour. Time permitting, we could actually, but I guess all of you have important meetings lined up after this. So thank you very much for taking the time out, joining us today. It was a great panel, a great discussion, having all of you, all the major stakeholders of the manufacturing sector speak about the sector at length. And we spoke about the disruption of COVID. I've made a few notes I'm going to read out of that. So we spoke about the disruption that COVID has caused, and it has perhaps provided us an unprecedented opportunity to rethink and reshape tomorrow. I'll quote Mr. Patel here when he said that this is perhaps our opportunity to capture technology like IoT, like AI, to harness the power of data. And he also gave us the example of Maruti and spoke about the intelligent dashboard that they've created for their customers, where tech is opening up a new avenue of data management. Mr. Mehta, you spoke about achieving scale with greater stakeholder involvement as a path ahead to attain higher manufacturing growth. We also, Mr. Sridhar, you spoke about the importance of quality in our path to attaining higher manufacturing growth. I mean, if we have to go there, quality is going to be a very important thing. Mr. Agarwal, Mr. Chaba, Mr. Sodhi, you all spoke about the right mix of policy, regulation, skill, but more than that, intent to perhaps, and a collaboration between India Inc. and the government if we are to at least achieve, if we are to even go nearer the 25% mark when it comes to the manufacturing sector and India's GDP. Mr. Sodhi, you said, Dr. Sodhi, sorry, you said that you have great faith in the 1.3 billion population of India and the demand that will be created. With that, we hope that somebody from the government is listening in. When they give the supply side incentives, we're still waiting for the demand side incentives to kick in. With that, thank you very much. Thank you to my co-moderator. I'll hand over the platform to Mr. Patel for your vote of thanks.
Look, I mean, having a distinguished panel like this is just a privilege, and always good to interact with fellow leaders, and more importantly, those who are so close to the action and actually shaping and trailblazing work that's happening in India today. So I just want to personally thank everyone. Clearly, thank you, Alokesh and Suchetna, for moderating this. I know that these are always difficult to sort of maneuver, make sure that we get all the points in, that everyone has the right airtime, and even getting the right perspectives together. So thank you again, all the panelists. Thank you, E.T., Alokesh, Suchetna, and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. Thank you to all the panelists. And hopefully we'll all remain connected. We'll keep you posted on the post-event coverage and other things that we come up with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.